Jack Flaherty is a Detroit Tiger yet again. Let's talk about that and more all today on Locked On Tigers.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Monday, February 3rd, 2025. Thank you so much for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5. And if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Happy Monday, everyone. Hope you all had a fantastic weekend. Late Sunday night, the Detroit Tigers did, in fact, make another signing, and it is a big one. Jack Flaherty returns to the Motor City on a 2-year deal with an opt-out after year one. We'll talk all about the terms of the contract, what it means, his fit, what the rotation looks like now, etc., etc., etc. We'll attack every angle of this. I really find it funny that the second that a signing happens after, say, 7 p.m., I get a ton of tweets and messages on social media asking, like, oh, like, did you record already? Or did you just get screwed over and now you have to redo it? Today, you know what? This is the first time you are witnessing the first time I've recorded here on Sunday. So don't have to scrap an episode that was already made. I was currently in the middle of making my outline for the episode, though, when it happened. So did have to scrap that and restart. But for a darn good reason, Jack Flaherty returns to the Motor City. Like I said, this is interesting for a lot of reasons. One is I didn't think we'd be here. I didn't think that this was going to happen. I've said that on air multiple times, clearly was very wrong about it. Over the weekend, there was a report from a few different national writers that said Flaherty might be willing to go to more of a shorter term deal. Going into the offseason, it was 5 years. Like, that's really what he wanted, and that was pretty well known. And that's why I didn't think he was going to come back to the Tigers. Also, they just traded him. The Detroit Tigers traded him, 6-7 months ago. So I really didn't see it. And here we are within 48 hours of the updated report that Flaherty is going to be, start entertaining shorter deal and shorter term in a contract. He ends up back in Detroit. Obviously was phenomenal. One of the best players for the 2024 Detroit Tigers, had a 2.95 ERA with Detroit, then had a 3.58 ERA in LA. That puts his overall season ERA just under 3.2. Had a phenomenal year. Had elite strikeout numbers, really good swing and miss numbers. We saw kind of I feel comfortable calling kind of it like the revelation of his curveball this year. Not that it didn't have good swing and miss numbers the year before, but this was the usage of it in the way it was utilized was something we have not seen really in Flaherty's entire career in terms of him being fastball, slider, and curveball. He didn't throw too many changeups because he was willing to throw curveballs in any situation, really. And it's so visually appealing to me, which doesn't mean anything. This is just like a quick side tangent, I guess. I think that obviously I understand, we're in an age of spin and everybody loves the sweeper and whatnot, but having two distinct different breaking balls, having a slider and a curveball is just so awesome, and like it's baller. Like that's just sick, dude. Like you're cool as, like I don't know. I just, his slider was such an incredible pitch, had a whiff rate of over 36%. His curveball had a whiff rate of 43.5% and an opponent batting average of 164. That is a run value on Baseball Savant of positive 12, which makes it one of the more valuable curveballs in all of baseball. So you pair that with, obviously, we talked a lot last season about his fastball and how it just wasn't nearly as effective as it was really since the big injury. But like from 2021 to 2020, or 2022 and 2023, I guess, the four seam fastball was just not as good of a pitch as it was for him when he was really young and getting Cy Young votes. And to see him turn that around and make his fastball a really good, solid pitch again, I think is what set up and opened the door for all of these other big improvements that he had within his breaking balls. So obviously a phenomenal season. I know I'm kind of preaching to the choir. We don't have to spend too much more time on the type of pitcher he is. I think everyone that is a Tigers fan is pretty well aware and pretty well acquainted with Flaherty. He is 29 years old, still under 30. And this upcoming season will be his age, 29, and he'll turn 30 this calendar year. So the deal is 2 years, 45 mil. Now up to 2 years, 45 mil. So this is kind of a weird one. 1 year, 25 mil is 2025. He is going to get paid $25 million. I say AAV. It's a 1 year deal. So just total AAV, whatever. 25 mil this calendar year. Year 2, 2026, is a player option for just $10 million, which you look at and you go, okay, he's going to opt into a $15 million pay cut. Like that seems unlikely. But there is also a vesting part of the option where if he makes 15 starts, there's another $10 million added on to that, and it then becomes a $20 million deal, which is obviously much more in line with what he is going to be making this season. The 25 mil he will make in 2025 puts him among the top, I believe it's 10 highest paid pitchers in baseball if we're going purely on AAV and not total contract. Initial thoughts of the deal, I'll be completely honest with you, I'm not in love with it. That doesn't mean I'm not in love with bringing Flaherty back. I'm very pro him being back. I love this rotation now. We'll talk about that in segment 2. The contract details, I just personally, and maybe this is just a me issue, which is totally fine if it is, I really struggle to get super excited or super optimistic about deals that have player options in them. Because essentially, what happens with a player option is if that player is performing well below expectations, then they're going to opt in. And like Javi, right? Like Javi has been brutal, like legitimately one of the worst hitters in baseball in his Tigers tenure. Obviously, he's going to opt in. And then if they're really good and way above expectations, then they're going to opt out and you don't get them for the other year. So like it's tough for me because I almost view it as a lose-lose. Not 100% of the time. There are certain instances where a player is playing right at market value and just decides to opt in. And there have been plenty of players in the history of baseball that opt in and do well after they opt in. This isn't a hard set rule. That's just kind of the thing I personally struggle with when a deal has a player option in it. But I think that the Tigers also did a good job of kind of covering and giving themselves a little bit of an insurance policy with that vesting part of the deal where he has to make 15 starts to implement $10 million more dollars. I'll get a little bit more in depth on that. Then we'll talk about the rotation, what it looks like now, and more right after this. Got to talk to y'all today about our friends over at FanDuel. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl is just icing on the cake. So download the app or head to fanduel.com to get started. Bet just $5 and you can win $200 in bonus bets if that $5 bet wins. That's fanduel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 59. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Segment 2, Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in as always. So, was talking a little bit about the contract before the break, and something I just really wanted to give the Tigers front office credit for, as much as I don't love the contract necessarily. It's just expensive and there's a player option, but they did a good job in that option of giving themselves a little bit of wiggle room and a little bit of insurance. They are essentially saying, the Tigers front office is saying, if this dude stays healthy, we are very confident that he will be very good. And the only way that he's not worth this money is if he gets hurt and literally is not on the field making starts. But if he's on the mound, he's going to be good. So the only way the Tigers truly get like completely screwed here is if Flaherty stays healthy and is like Baltimore Orioles Flaherty in terms of, ERA and production and output and whatnot, and then opts in and is that again in 2026. That's really the only way that the Tigers make out super poorly here. Any other way, right? He's amazing in 2025. He's a Cy Young candidate. Okay, then he's going to opt out. He's hurt for 2025. Well, then he's going to opt in, but he's going to be worth 10 mil in 2026. That's nothing. We just signed Alex Cobb for like 17, $10 million in today's day and age of baseball, especially for a starting pitcher, is nothing. So that's really the only kind of, worst case scenario, like pressing the panic button type of scenario that could happen with this deal. And I think that's pretty unlikely. I like the only thing standing in the way of Flaherty, I agree with the Tigers, is I guess what I'm saying. It is, that back flaring up. And, like that's been a huge problem for him over the, last 3, 4, 5 years now. And there were concerns and there were kind of red flags that were raised at the deadline for the Tigers and why maybe they didn't get as much as people thought they should have at the time. Like how quickly we forget that whole saga, right? People cited the back issue when he was in LA. There was a couple of missed starts there because of the back. The Tigers skipped in the rotation a couple of times. He kept getting those injections in his back, right? Like, and if that truly is the only thing standing between him and a really good season, then the Tigers did a pretty darn good job here, because it's a 1-year deal then with 10 mil next year if that truly is like impossible for him to overcome. I really like this a lot. I'm thrilled that Jack Flaherty is back, and I think that this rotation now has the potential to truly be incredible. I think when we look back on, again, the trade deadline and how much of an outcry there was from the fan base on the return that Flaherty got, and kind of how silly that looks now, right? Like Sweeney was valuable. Lorenzo looks incredible. And now Flaherty's back. and that is, I was wrong about a lot surrounding Jack Flaherty. I was hesitant with the whole signing initially last year. I was for it because we needed arms, but was hesitant then. And then this year, certainly 2024, I had said just a few weeks ago, I think just last week, even. I had said that I didn't think there was any way he was going to come back. I thought he wanted a longer term deal, and the Tigers weren't going to be willing to do that, and they were going to prioritize other things. I also said at the deadline that, fans were going to be like, oh, you can just re-sign him after you trade him, and that never happens, and nobody ever does that, and that's, a complete dream and a fantasy that's never going to happen. 0 for 3 here, right? And I'm very obviously happy to be. I would 100% rather be wrong and have it benefit the Detroit Tigers, which is what this looks like to be. So I am thrilled. And like I said, this rotation really is exciting. It already kind of was. Now it's really exciting. You're talking about Tarek Skubal, Jack Flaherty, Reese Olson, Alex Cobb as your top 4. And then that 5 is either Jackson Jobe, Casey Mize, or someone else. And I think that's the exciting part, is there are a lot of other arms to choose from. I've mentioned a lot of them lately, but I mean, Sawyer Gipson-Long is going to be healthy this year. That's super exciting. A guy we haven't seen pitch since 2023. And then like Brant Herter was phenomenal for the Tigers in the second half of last season. After getting called up, Ty Madden showed some flashes. They do still have Kenta Maeda, although I don't think anyone is going to be really, chomping at the bit to get him in to this rotation. Matt Manning is still here. We'll see how he looks in spring training. Kiter Montero was really valuable for the Tigers down the stretch last year. Like and again, that's not even mentioning the 2 at the start, which were Jobe and Mize, who I think are probably the clubhouse leaders to get that last spot. This team has had a lot of injuries over the last really like 4 years in its rotation. I mean, literally since 2021, this team seems to have a lot of injury problems within its starting rotation. And that's happened to the Tigers, but it's also happened to all of baseball. That is just an epidemic that is sweeping the sport, and that people are trying to figure out how to combat and fight off. And I'm not sure you are, unless you're willing to sacrifice velocity and stuff, which I don't think that many people are going to be willing to do. So it is always good to have pitching depth. And Flaherty, as we mentioned already, has had back injuries. Alex Cobb has barely pitched over the last calendar year. He has had plenty of injuries. Casey Mize has had a ton of injuries the last 2 years. Like it is a good thing to have depth. I don't want to hear like, oh, well now, Mize might not get an opportunity, or Jobe is blocked, or, Brant Herter's not. They will all pitch. Assuming their own health, all of them will pitch. The days of using 5 starting pitchers and getting through a full season have been gone for dang near a decade. They will all pitch, and they will all pitch plenty. This is a deal that makes the top end of the rotation better, as well as the depth, because you add Flaherty to that top 2, and then everyone else moves down. So you're really adding to 2 different facets of your rotation at once in one player. And I'm just really excited for spring training, for obviously just, baseball being back and whatnot. But I'm excited to look at all of these arms. Like there are so many talented arms on this roster now. So much stuff. So much. And it's just going to be really fun in spring training games to keep an eye on. Like it really feels like every single player that takes the mound is going to be like, oh, like we got to keep an eye on this guy to see how he looks in this situation. I'm thrilled with this. Absolutely thrilled. We'll talk about the rotation a little bit more, talk about Jobe specifically. Then we'll end the show by talking about Bregman, as we kind of have to now. We will do that right after this. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Third and final segment, Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in, as always, making us your first listen every single day. Shots to every dayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back on Wednesday as we continue to talk about the offseason, hopefully some more moves. This is 2 episodes in a row that we've had a signing to discuss. That's new territory after, months of no action and no movement. Now we've had back-to-back shows with a signing after Tommy Kahnle on Friday. So this rotation, I already mentioned, Skubal, Flaherty, Olsen, Cobb, and then 5, whoever the 5th is going to be, kind of seems like the slam dunk, no doubt order that's going to be used on opening day, assuming all of those players' health. I think the big conversation is just going to be Job in the 5th spot or not. Imagine that rotation. Imagine Skubal, Flaherty, Olsen, Cobb, Job. That is electric. That is the amount of stuff in that rotation is diabolical. That is filthy. And then you add again, like the bullpen that was so good and added a strikeout artist as well. Golly, that is just awesome. And Cody Stavenhagen of The Athletic, who we love Cody here, does a great job. Had a I don't know if it was a report or more of just like a passing comment in an article he wrote over the weekend, but a few days ago said that the Tigers' plan is for Job to make the rotation. Now, this was obviously before the Flaherty deal, so we'll see if that potentially changes anything. It's a lot easier to say that when you can give Mize a spot and Job a spot. That's not quite as possible if you're going to have a 5-man. So I'm really interested in the follow-up storylines for Job after this. Like, that's one of my biggest questions. Well, like, if I had the ability to ask Scott Harris a question, it would be, what does this mean for like the odds of Job being in the rotation to start off the year? I have said on air a few times that I don't think he will start off the season, not because I don't want him to. I want him to very badly. I just don't think the Tigers would. Now, it's weird how adding another starting pitcher makes me almost think they now will. I don't know, man. That's just going to be one of the bigger storylines surrounding spring training. Is going to be who gets that 5th spot in the rotation, and what do you do with Casey Mize if he's not in the rotation out of camp? That'll be interesting. But there is just this rotation got absolutely, like, pretty legitimately and comfortably better on Sunday with this addition. It raises the floor and it raises the ceiling, as I mentioned earlier, of the production you can expect out of this rotation. And I genuinely think if they do go with Job, you're talking about a rotation that legitimately could be one of the better rotations in the American League, if not like one of the premier rotations in baseball. Now, I'm not saying like the Dodgers are ridiculous and have like 5 aces, basically. I'm not saying they're going to be the best rotation in baseball, but I think if you start having those top 5, 7, 10 rotos in baseball conversation, I think the ceiling at a minimum of those 5 has to be on that list. And that's just unbelievably exciting. I also think it's funny that the front office said that they were done adding pitching. And then here we are with like a big name. One of the better starting pitchers on the market is now a Detroit Tiger. I find that humorous. Maybe we just don't believe anything the front office says. I think maybe we go with that. Because like they shouldn't say, hey, no, we're gonna like see if Flaherty falls into our laps. Like, no, obviously that's not smart. So yeah, maybe we just we already kind of do here on this show. I complain all the time about how I don't really believe anything front offices say, but we're going to keep that going because clearly that was not the case. Now, the big question that I've already been asked about a billion times, and he got signed, 3 hours ago in my world, is does this change the Tigers' aggressiveness or odds on landing Alex Bregman? I cannot tell you with certainty. Like, I haven't heard anything. I haven't, it just happened, and I don't have Scott Harris's phone number. So, like, I haven't heard anything that would officially say, oh, yeah, like they've said, sources say that they are still. But I'll tell you, it shouldn't. This should not affect the Alex Bregman pursuit literally at all. Pre-signing Flaherty, the Tigers were listed as a co-leader with the Boston Red Sox, according to Bob Nightingale. Sure, I don't need. Again, as you all know, I'm so tired of Bregman updates. I'm kind of done and over them until he signs somewhere. I don't really care what the latest update is. But it shouldn't affect the Tigers' ability to sign Bregman whatsoever. You're talking about one of the lowest payrolls in the entire sport, and it's again, potentially 1-year deal. Like if Flaherty is an all-star this year, it's a 1-year deal. And even if he's hurt this year, then it's a 1-year deal, but he opts in, obviously. Then he's back next year for $10 million. Like, I don't want to retread the conversation I already had, but it is that the Tigers front office, again, did a good job kind of making this, for as much as I still don't love it. And it has allowed them to still absolutely, positively, without any shadow of a doubt, have the ability to go after Bregman. If they cite Flaherty as a reason to not, then this is a joke. Like that's ridiculous. Now, I'm not saying if he signs elsewhere that it's just automatically ownership in the front office's fault. I don't know Alex Bregman either, believe it or not. Maybe he doesn't want to play here. Maybe he prefers Boston. I don't know the dude. And so at the end of the day, it takes two to tango. We'll see what happens. But if money does stand in the way just because of this, that's ridiculous. This is a 1 to 2 year deal. Bregman would be getting 5+. That's absurd. Plus, you're not exactly injecting a lot of confidence in the fan base that you're going to bring back Scooble either. Like it's tough to really highlight how low the Tigers' payroll is/was a week ago, and honestly, even after this deal, still kind of is. This should have zero effect on that. I don't think it will, but only time will tell. So ultimately, contract not my favorite thing in the world, but I absolutely love this addition. I love the rotation now. I said at the beginning of the offseason that I wanted 2 starting pitchers. They signed Alex Cobb and said they were done, and I threw a tantrum on here and said I was mad about how that they were only going to get 1 and that I really wanted 2. There you go. Really teaching kids that if you just cry and throw a temper tantrum, you get what you want. But it's obviously, again, joking aside, I think this is fantastic. And I think if they land Bregman, you're talking about a really good offseason, which is so funny given where this fan base was in terms of, thoughts and opinions of the offseason a week ago. Nonetheless, 2-3 months ago. And even if you don't get Bregman, you've still made some solid additions. You've added a bat, you've added a bullpen piece, you've added 2 starting pitchers. They've been relatively active. They've spent some money. But I think that if they bring in Bregman, you're talking about a premier offseason and a lot of reason to be excited about 2025. Thanks for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back on Wednesday, hopefully recapping another signing, as the last 2 have been that. But either way, we'll be back on Wednesday. I appreciate you all greatly. Thank you so much for sticking with me throughout the offseason. The Detroit Tigers play baseball in this month. We are in February, and baseball games are played by your Detroit Tigers in the month of February. I'll catch y'all Wednesday, baby. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope. Go Tigers.